Hi, welcome to It's So Friday. So happy you could join us again. I'm happy to be back in the It's So Friday studio. Today, I'm so excited. We are going to be making the Penny's Dolls quilt featuring Penny's Dollhouse by Darlene Zimmerman. You can see the quilt behind us here. It's a really fun, quick way to use a panel, but get a really impressive looking quilt without too much extra effort. And I'm going to show you how. So, first things first, go onto our website and download the pattern. You can find the link in the post above. It looks like this. That's how you'll know you have the right pattern. And the other thing you'll need for this quilt, well, there's two things. But to make the quilt, you're going to need the Easy Quilting Ruler by Darlene Zimmerman. It's the Tri-Rex tool, so it actually is a ruler that comes with two pieces. The one you're going to need is this one that has the right angle. And optional, if you love the scallop border that you see on this quilt here and you want to add scallop borders to this quilt and every other quilt that you make from here on out, you're going to want to go ahead and get the Scalloped ruler tool by Darlene Zimmerman, also for easy quilting. And I'll show you how we're going to use these later in this episode. Okay, so without further ado, let's I guess we'll jump right in. We'll talk about what you need for this episode, for this quilt. I would recommend a long ruler. You don't have to have one this long, but you will be cutting strips the width of your fabric, so it helps to have a longer ruler. And you'll need the fabrics that you want to highlight. So today we're just going to make a smaller version of this quilt. So we're going to make 4 of the little girls, and we'll show you how to do that. And I've already done some of my pre-cutting, but I guess first things first, let's show how we're going to use this ruler. So the very first step, before you actually use the ruler, the pattern is going to have you cut strips of fabric at different heights. So this ruler works on everything from 1.5 inches to 6.5 inches. So it really gives you a lot of range in the size of pieces. So you'll use this same ruler for both these long triangles and these smaller triangles, which will then be put together to make that cool shape that you see there. So you'll start with your piece of fabric. Ugh, let's see, okay. You have your piece of fabric, and I like to just put selvage to selvage and give it a little press. And now I use my ruler and I line the ruler up with the folded edge so that I make sure I'm getting a nice straight cut. Sometimes if you don't fold it perfectly flat and you line your ruler up with your selvage edge, if it's not straight at the end, you'll get a piece that kind of dips like a V in the middle, and that's not what you want if you're going to be cutting from a continuous piece like this. So once you have it lined up on the folded side, go ahead and give it a little cut to square up your edge, because you want a nice straight edge to start, and then cut the length that it says to cut for your piece. So some of these need 5" by width of fabric, some need 3.5. I've already done all the cutting, so I'm actually just going to cut the 5" by width of fabric so that you can see it better when we go to the up-close camera. Okay. Sometimes while I'm sewing and I get to the end, I don't take the time to fold it, and I just kind of throw it, because at my home I have a wall against here, so I like throw it in a pile. But pretty soon I have a pile of fabric, and then I just look at it and think, I am not going to fold that. Someone else has to do that. And then after 3.5 months and a really tall pile of fabric, I finally fold it. So fold your fabric as you go. It'll make your life easier in the long run. Okay, now you have this clean 5" by width of fabric strip. So let's go to a close-up, and I'll show you what you do with this. Okay, you have your 5" strip, and you can see, let me show you with a ruler, that this is 5 inches. So 5 inches. And what you're going to do is start with your ruler, make sure that you don't turn it like this or this. Now this pattern, or just pick a side. So I like the side with easy quilting facing the right way up. If you start cutting with the logo facing reverse, so with the printed sign on the top, and then you change it, it's going to do weird things to your cutting. So just make sure you're consistent with which direction your ruler is. And so you'll line your ruler up with the top here, and you'll notice that the 5" line now is at the bottom of that piece of fabric, and the top matches up here. So go ahead and give it a little cut. And you'll see, whoa, that's not what we want. Ugh, that was annoying. Okay, so you'll see that we have that nice clean line. And you'll notice that there's this little edge that's kind of cut off here. It doesn't just go all the way straight. Just take your ruler and gently cut that little piece off. And I'll show you why that's important later. Now you can turn your fabric. And I like to turn it so that I have some control over where my hand is. I like my hand to be on this side so that I can, because I'm right-handed, I want to be able to make sure I'm putting good pressure on the ruler so that it doesn't shift. And now you have this piece. Now the pattern has you cutting in pairs, and that's why you want to keep the fabric with the wrong sides together, so that when you cut, you're actually getting two pieces that go different directions. Yeah, so you can see one is right way, one is wrong way, and they're stacked like that. Now for each block, so if you're making the full quilt, the pattern will tell you how many pieces you need. But if you are making just a couple blocks, for each individual block, you'll need 4 or 2 sets, so 4 of these total, of the large ones and 4 of the small ones, plus the backgrounds that coordinate. Okay, so here I haven't cut off that little end piece again. So again, just make sure you're lining it up with the 5-inch line. And I know this is the 5-inch line because this arrow is saying that's 4.5 and that's 5.5, and right in between 4.5 and 5.5 is 5. Yay, strong math skills here today. All right, so you're going to proceed with cutting out your templates using this ruler for all of the rest that it calls for. So let's go back to the main screen and we'll talk about what to do next. Okay, welcome back. After you have cut all your pairs, what I like to do is pair my triangles per block so that I can just kind of chain piece. So in this stack I have 4 background pieces and 4 of the, 2 pairs of the rectangle, or 2 pairs of the triangles, not rectangles, and 2 pairs of for the background and for the solid. And that's for the small ones, and same with the large ones. Okay, now the other pieces that you'll need for this block are these little rectangles that are easy to kind of get lost, so be careful when you cut them that you don't lose them, otherwise you'll have to recut more and it's kind of annoying. They're like 2 inches by 2 3/4 inches. And you will also need 4 of these 2-inch squares, and for now I'm just going to set them with my little rectangles and set them aside. And I'll show you how we're going to cut the dolls. Okay, now the dolls come in this adorable panel. They probably remind you all of like the sweet little baby dolls that you played with or that your kids played with when you were little, but they're really, really sweet. And you'll notice that each one of these girls has a different color around the outside. Now, this is where you kind of have some creativity, you have some license to be creative here. All right, you'll see in this quilt that each of these girls has a border kind of around them in different colors. So this one is yellow and then there's a green next to it. Now if you don't like the look of that border, it's really easy to kind of work with when you pair your rectangles that you want. I don't know why I keep saying rectangles, they are triangles. When you pair your triangles, when you pair these with your doll shape, say you don't want that extra border pop, then all you have to do is pair like yellow triangles with this one, and it'll really kind of disappear and you'll just see that cute scallop in white. But if you're like me and you like how it looks having that extra little color, you can decide what your favorite color is to go with that border and kind of pair that one. So I really love how like the yellow looks with the pink, so I'm going to put these 2 together for this block. But anyway, going back to this. Now the great thing about this quilt is that you have some flexibility with cutting around the dolls so that you can kind of move it around a bit. Sometimes you get a panel and it's just like slightly, like the line's not 100% straight, and so if it requires it to be totally exact, then what happens is you can't quite get the right fussy cut. So let's take this over to up close and I'll show you after I clear my space, because I am a messy, messy quilter. Maybe I'll give her a little iron first because she deserves some love. Sorry, guys. Okay. You have your little lady here. And from these panels, you're going to want to cut the dolls at 6.5 by 9.5 inches. And so this is a 6-inch ruler, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so it's not big enough. But you can see where 9.5 is, and it'll just kind of show you. So remember, whenever you're looking at a fussy cut, if you want to center a motif, you have to continue to look at your seam allowance by adding a 1/4 inch over here and then a 1/4 inch down here. So if this is 9.5, and you were to go in a 1/4 inch on that 9.5 line, let me show you this way. This is your 9.5 inch line right here. And if you were to go in a 1/4 inch for your seam allowance, that's what you would actually see. So you want to move your ruler so that you see a little bit of the pink at the bottom. And that's, remember, this is after you've gotten rid of your seam allowance at the bottom. And then you want to check the top and make sure your seam allowance looks good there. So if you were to remove a 1/4 inch, you can still see that pink. But now you see on this side, if you were to remove that 1/4 inch over here, you'd be running into the scallop. And so we're just going to nudge this over a little bit and see how that works. And it might not be totally straight, but that's okay, because you'll see you get that whole scallop there, the whole scallop here, the whole scallop here, and the whole scallop here. So that is when you're feeling good, you've got your position. Oh, this isn't a 6.5 inch ruler. Hello, okay, good. I was like, I thought I remembered more. So I'm gonna draw my lines in instead of just cutting right now, because, yeah, use the right size ruler or you'll be sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna mark my 9.5. And I marked this side because I think that'll still be enough. So if this is where the 6 inch is, I did not mark the bottom. All right, so 9.5. At home I have a big square ruler. I do not have that here. Actually, I probably have that here and I just didn't even think about needing it until right now. Okay, so if that is here, let's add another 1/2 inch. And perfect. Okay, so do this with the right size ruler, because you can see here that we're going to be okay. If you were to take in a 1/4 inch, you have a little bit over here. You'll have a little bit more over here on this one because I didn't center it right. So let's maybe just go ahead and center it right. Let's bump this over about 1/8. Sorry, I know. We're not even going to use this one, but for for video's sake, it's important that, you know. When I make a mistake in my lines, I like to draw an arrow. In high school, I had a friend whose parents were architects, and they showed me how when they drew new lines in their housing layout things that architects make, blueprints, they would do this so that they knew which line was right, and that way you don't accidentally cut an incorrect line. So if I forget which one that is, I'm going to actually, okay, I'm going to mark that this line is the right one, and now I know when I cut to cut that line. And now if you look, the 1/4 inch is pretty centered across both sides. So let's go ahead and cut that. Okay, so cutting on that line that I drew the arrow to. And because you don't need the entire piece of border and everything that's included in this panel here for this quilt, it gives you that flexibility to cut a little bit further than the line that you need, because it's not going to interfere with the next block. Sometimes when you need it to be, sorry if my head hit the camera there, sometimes if you need it to be, you know, if it's like right here, you have to be really careful and cut with scissors. But look at how fantastic that looks. And then you have this lovely piece of fabric with a hole in it. Yay. Okay, so do this with as many dolls as you want to make. And let's go back to the main camera over here. Sorry, the camera hits like here, and when I lean in, I'm like, it's Friday. It's Friday. Going on a trip this Friday or Saturday, and I'm already like on vacation in my head. Okay, quilting. let's go back to quilting. So you have your sweet little dolls. They're all cut out to the right size. Use a square ruler. It's going to be a little easier, or a ruler at least 6.5 inches wide so you can make sure. Okay, let's start with these. I like to chain piece them in the sections they're going. And the great thing about these is that because you've cut them in pairs, you're just going to take one. Actually, let's look up close and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. You're just going to take one and pair it like this with the right sides together. You just want to be careful that you're not trying to like force it. Like if you were to force it like this, you'll get the incorrect side of your fabric. And since you want them to be right, you actually are going to pair like this. So when you put them together, you can say right sides. Just make sure that the same direction is going with the background and with the, I don't know, my brain stopped working here. So basically, to know that you're going to sew them in the right pairs, take the same cut where this one is going this direction as opposed to this direction. See, like, I don't know. I'm struggling so hard today. Anyway, there is a difference in these pieces. Okay, if this pair was cut together with the right side, or with the wrong sides of the fabric together. And so take a background piece that also faces with the right side down and the angle cut this way, and with the right side up and the angle cut this way. These are the two you're going to sew together. It should look like this. Yes, let's go sew. Using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Yeah, Elle's gonna love me. Let's go back to up close and I'll show you something. Oh my God. All right, remember all those little notches that you clipped off? The reason that that is so great is because when you line these pieces up with the right sides together, you'll see that this edge goes right to the edge of the piece here, and that edge that you've notched over here goes right to the end of this one. And that is how you know that you are piecing them correctly. Now, if you hadn't notched those edges, they'd be going off further, and it'd be a little hard to make sure that you're lining everything up correctly. And you're just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance along this line right here. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you want to pin, you certainly can. I don't like to pin, so I don't. All right. Okay. I'm correct. I know how all these go together. Totally. Done this. I promise. Okay. Chain piecing is really fun for these because it's just nice to not have to like cut the thread every time and worry about the thread kind of falling into your bobbin or catching on your fabric. And so I like to work at this, but I like to leave them in sections so that I don't have to kind of resort it. If you're going to make the whole quilt at one time, you could do it all at once. Some people have these like really long chain pieces and they use them like bunting for parties and stuff. I don't actually know if they use them for parties, but it sounds like the kind of thing you could do. Anyway, so after you finish your chain piecing, I go ahead and cut. Now I have 4 of these. Now I'm going to take these over and I'm going to press, and I like to press all in the same direction. So I press to the dark side today. So just give them a quick press while they're still connected, because then they don't go anywhere. And now you have these 4 lovely little rectangles. That's why I kept wanting to call them rectangles. Okay, use a pair of sharp little scissors and just go in between the threads, careful not to cut your fabric, and just snip them apart. And now you have these little guys loose. Now, the next part that you're going to do is pair a set to create like a little mountain like this. And with the mountain peaks together, so like the highest point of them together, sew along that line with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And because the seams are at the top here, I'm going to start at this bottom just so that it doesn't have too much bulk as it starts going. And you're going to do that with both sets of those pairs that you just made. And I know I said chain piecing on the other thing, but I'm not going to chain piece these. Personal preference. Sometimes it's just fun to press the button with the little scissors on it. Okay. So now I have these little mountains, and the point should be nice and crisp, and you should have, well, that point is, could be better, but this point is good. And you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance above, so just give those a little press. And I am going to press those open. You don't have to, but sometimes I feel like if you get too many layers of bulk, it gets harder when you go to put the whole thing together or quilt it. And so when you have the opportunity to kind of press a seam open, it can make your life a little bit easier later. So on the back, it's going to look like this. And now I'm just going to set those aside and repeat that process with the larger rectangles. So you're really going to feel triangles. You're really going to feel like you're in the Twilight Zone because you just did this, but on a smaller scale. But I mean, really exact same shape, same process, same chain piecing, same colors. It's very much like you've been here before. Now, if you didn't unstack your, or if you didn't even unstack your stacks, if you didn't mix them up like I did with the other ones, they're already in the right order. If you have your right sides out on both the, as long as you were consistent with leaving your right sides out when you folded your fabrics to do the cut, then literally all you have to do is pick them up and they're already going to be in the right order. Isn't that a neat bit of fun trivia? The other day, my girlfriend sent me this thing, and it said, if you add the year you were born to your age this year, it's going to equal the total year, like for this year. And then it said, that only happens once every like 100,000 or 1,000 years. And we sat there puzzling for a while, and then she said, I don't think that's right. And I said, I know. You know, I don't know, because I added for next year too, and it totally works for next year. And then we realized that if you add the year you were born to the year how old you're going to be this year, it's always going to be the year it is now, because that's the total. And then we had a really good laugh, and the moral of the story is don't believe everything you read on the internet. All right, we're going to press again. Okay, so we're just over here pressing, not a lot to see. Okay. Look, more chain, and this was because I was talking about my story and I forgot that there was another one sitting there and I stopped chain piecing early. Whoops. Okay, again, just snipping those little things in between and creating those little mountains and putting them together with the tops of the mountains at the top. And this time, I'm going to try sewing, starting with the tops. I don't know why. Feeling brave. Sometimes too much bulk at the beginning of a seam can be like irritating for your sewing machine, but I have faith in this machine, so I'm just going to go for it. Woohoo! Also, starting at the tops might mean that you'll have better point matching. Like, these points look excellent. I'm so happy with them. Okay, now I'm going to press these seams open again. Hear all these like rattly noises. I'm like, what's happening over there? And I looked up and my boss said, sorry. Okay, so I gave them a little press, and now I'm going to clip them. Okay, now you have these long triangles, and these are actually going to go on either side of your doll. So if we go over to up close, I'll show you. So you can see that these are the exact size of your doll. And these little guys are here, but you're missing what goes here. So that's where these little rectangles come into play. These rectangles fit right here. But if you notice, let's go back to the main screen and I'll show you something on the quilt. If you notice, you have these cute little shoe fly blocks in between all of these. And it kind of looks like it's part of the sashing, but actually the only part that's part of the sashing are these little center squares. The rest of it is cleverly built into each block. And so if you line up your colors in a different way, you'll get 5 different colors in your shoe fly every time, and it looks adorable. So let's go back to the close-up and I'll show you how we accomplish this. Now this part, this part is important because I didn't do it right the first time and I had to remake them at home. So I kind of like to visualize it like this. You're going to take an erasable pen, and on the back sides of your fabric, you're going to draw, just using a straight edge. I'm going to use the specialty ruler because it's smaller than that giant ruler. Just draw a line from point to point. This will be a stitching line because you're going to replace one of the corners in these little units with these little squares. Well, triangles, you'll see. Okay, so you've made these points. Now, you want to make sure that they're lined up so that when you sew and flip the corner, you end up with the corners facing the bottom, like the bottom and over here. If you accidentally mess up and put them so that the corners are like over here, you won't get the same effect. So what I'm going to do is pin a little bit, just so that I know that they don't shift around, because I want them in that corner. And then in this one, I want it in this corner. And I'm not even like pinning so that it's perfect. I'm just pinning so that it stays in where I want it to be. This corner and this corner. Okay. This little girl is going to look so cute when she's done. Okay, let's go back over the sewing machine. And now we're just going to take the pin out, line it up carefully in the corner you already had it, and you're going to sew directly on that line. Don't sew a 1/4 inch away from the line, sew directly on that line. So I am going to move my needle to the center so that I can see where it's going. I have a clear open foot here, and when I have the choice to start from either a corner or from the center with another piece of fabric, I'm always going to start down here, because a lot of times the corners will pull into your feed dogs and make kind of a mess of your project, and it's not super fun to try and fix it, and then sometimes it pulls the fabric out of the way or does something crazy to it and you have to cut new pieces. And if you are already working with a limited number of fabric, that is not what you want. So, and that is a thing that I'm saying, but I also actually always do, because sometimes I say things like, I should chain piece, and then I don't. Yeah. But I actually legitimately do that, because trying to sew a corner like that from a corner can be really tricky. Okay. All right. Now once you've got these all together, you're going to make a cut. But what you are going to cut, oh look, they all lined up nicely. Let's go over to the up close and I'll show what's happening here. You want to make sure that you're not cutting the part with the extra bit of white. You only want to cut this piece. And you want to go a 1/4 inch away from your stitching. So I'm going to use this ruler because it has a 1/4 inch line built onto it. I'm going to line that 1/4 inch up with my stitching line. It can be just a little bit over if it needs to be. And cut there, cut that off. And repeat with all of them. I'm going to cut in between. Now, you're basically adding the seam allowance to that piece. Yay, as you go. And that's a little annoying, but I'm just going to let it go because I think it'll be okay. I think it'll get stuck in the seam allowance. If you wanted to resew that, you could, but I don't think you need to. Okay. So we've cut this off, and now when you press this open, you get that 2 3/4 by 2 inch rectangle, but now it has a pink corner. So let's go ahead and give those a press. I just had a pressing joke running through my head, like I'm so impressed with these pieces. Okay, now we can go back to the main up close screen and I'll show you how the layout looks. Okay. For this kind of quilt, and actually for most kinds of quilts, I find it very helpful to use a design wall because then you can lay out and see what your block is going to look like instead of just having pieces kind of floating all over your table like I usually do at home. And this is also a great time to final audition, so you can say, oh, do I really like how that yellow looks with the pink? Yes, I do. It's perfect. Wonderful. And so you can decide, you can either attach these sides here or these sides here, and then sew these here, here, or here. Basically assemble it however you want, but I'm going to assemble like this first. So let's go ahead and sew. Taking the pieces from how you laid them out, and bringing them over, I'm going to move one of these, put it right sides together with the block with the little girl on it, and sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if you just updated your, if you just updated your needle position to be in the center, change it back to your 1/4 inch. And by updated it, I mean moved it. Okay. So we are doing this, and I am just making sure that my points line up at the ends and are looking good as I sew. And then cut. What is Karen's tip? Karen has a tip.
Using the straight stitch plate on machines helps prevent your feed dogs from eating your fabric points too.
Karen, who is a Janome educator / my friend, says that if you put on a straight stitch plate, that will keep your fabric from really falling into the machine. That's true. I have a straight stitch plate here. I didn't use it because sometimes when I have my straight stitch plate on, I forget that I have a straight stitch plate on, and I do something fancy like a zigzag, and then I break my needle. So if you're going to use your straight stitch plate, it's a really great addition to your life and your sewing machine. However, don't try and do a zigzag stitch when you have your straight stitch plate on, because you'll be sorry.
It also says a feeder fabric, like a little square 2 by 2 inches.
Karen is also suggesting that we use a feeder fabric, like a little small scrap that you start with. That is also an excellent tip. Many of these tips save you time in the long run, but if you're impatient and you don't think about it beforehand, they don't end well. But then if you're impatient and you don't use them right, then your fabric feeds in, and we'll show you what I did, because whatever. Let's go up close and I'll show you. When you don't listen to Karen and you don't use a straight stitch plate and you don't use a leader, you get, this happens at the beginning because it's all messed up and it's jammed in the feed dogs, and this happened over here because I didn't do a good job. So we're going to take our friend, the seam ripper, and we are going to tear that seam out, and then we're going to listen to Karen, because Karen is wise and also very pretty.
Well,
Yeah.
she says these higher end Janome machines, like the one you're using, won't let those decorative zigzag stitches work when the straight stitch plate is on.
Karen says that the fancier machines won't let the zigzag stitch happen when you're using the straight stitch machine, but actually on this machine, the 8900, it definitely still can. So if you want to make sure that that can't happen to you, you have to get a higher than an 8900. I think Karen sews on the 15,000, which is like this amazing machine that can do, like, I swear it could do like backflips. It's so cool. That one definitely tells you, hey yo, what are you doing? This one does not. Okay, let's try this again. Let's put on a straight stitch plate. We'll learn something. It's really fun. When you want to change your plate on these machines, there's a little button. So you lift your foot all the way up, and then you just press this button. And it just pops off like quick release. Stores back in here, clips shut. Now this has these little feet, and we're just going to click it in. Wasn't that a very satisfying click? Okay. And this needs to go all the way. Oh, if I put my straight stitch plate on, this one doesn't even want me to move my needle position. All right. We're not going to use the straight stitch plate. Here's the thing. Maybe the 8900 can do that thing, and I just don't remember because, I don't know. Maybe the 8900 can tell you not to do it because it was giving me some attitude. Okay, if at first you don't succeed, use a leader. All you have to do is stick it in there, sew a little bit. Never hurts to pin. If you really don't want it to shift and you need accuracy, you could pin. I don't like to pin. I also don't like to have the thing not work on live camera, though. That's kind of embarrassing. So, all right, we'll pin. I don't think it's fun. Okay. Don't sew over your pins. We're just gonna go. Now that I'm pinning and listening to Karen, it's gonna be like, I love you. It's gonna work so nice, huh? All right. That was beautiful. It was beautiful. Okay. We're just gonna give that a little press. Fantastic. Use your leaders and enders and pin, and things happen with accuracy that you could never have predicted. There are some different kinds of quilters out there. Some quilters love to pin, and their work is always very precise. Some quilters do not pin, and their work is pretty precise. I like to think my work stays pretty precise, but I do spend an inordinate amount of time with my seam ripper. I guess I should tell you what I'm doing right now. So now I'm making the top, so I'm just adding this piece and this piece to the center so that it's now going to be the width of the block. Okay. And
Nail polish.
sorry, what?
Elle says you have great nail polish.
Thank you. Someone said that my nail polish is really great, and I'm really excited about it. I'm going on a trip, so I painted my nails specifically for my trip. It'll be fun. Okay. Now, once you have this piece, let's go up close and I'll show you. You're ready to attach it to this piece. Now, I didn't think about it when I was pressing, and so you can see that my seams here are pressed out and my seams here are pressed out. But if I want my seams to nest, I should actually press these seams in so that they kind of reduce bulk and go here. So I'm going to go back to my iron and press those in. And that's just a little thing to think about when you're laying out your block. You want it to really make it easier to press. So we're just going to line up those seams. You could pin, but we're back to not pinning over here. Okay, so we're just going for it. No pins here. Pin free's the way to be. Woohoo! No pins, and it turned out perfect. Yay! And we're going to give that a little press. Now we have to attach the bottom block. We are almost there with this block. Look at how cute she's looking. She's like, I just need the bottom here. We're like, okay, we can do that for you. So I talk to my blocks. I'm sure you all do too. We spend a lot of time alone with our sewing machines. We're bound to start talking to someone. There's a kid on this block, so I'm talking. I've had a lot of discussions about her outfit. Like the dress.
Have you named any of them?
My boss wants to know if I've named any of the blocks. I named this one Tina. I watched a lot of old shows growing up, and I remember this episode with a little doll called Talking Tina, and she was just always such a treasure. So I thought of Tina often as I worked on this quilt, and yeah. She's so sweet. I think she loves me. Okay, now we're going to put the piece you just constructed right sides together with the rest of your block, and we're going to give it a sew. And we're again going to go pin free and just see how it goes. Woohoo, so far so good. All right, and I'm just pausing here because I didn't pin anything. So when you don't pin, you have to kind of pause and make sure that your fabric is lined up the way you want it to as you keep sewing. Otherwise it tends to, like, you know, move a little bit, but it's perfect. So now I'm going to give it a final press. Doo, doo, doo. And I'm going to spray it with some flatter, which is a spray starch alternative. It just helps everything lay nice and flat and lovely. Let's give that a press. Okay, so now you have your block. Yay! And you spend some time making other blocks. Yay! Yay! That way Tina has friends. Maybe Maureen and Jan and Yael. This one is Yael. Okay. Okay. Sash your blocks by taking you'll have cut your sashing strips. So first I'm sashing the long strips first. So this one is the 12.5-inch strips. And I'm sashing these blocks together. So since I'm only going to make a square today, I'm going to sash using, I bet this isn't the right size. I bet this is the one I need for here. Okay, so that means that somewhere between my house and Robert Kaufman, I lost one of my sashing strips, which is good that I brought extra fabric then. Yay! We're going to cut a sashing strip. Just a single one though, because I don't need a ton. I'm just making a cute mini quilt for my dear friend Yael. She really loves these dolls, and she was really excited when I told her that this was going to be for her. And so, yeah. She's going to hang it over her bed at home because she really loves it so much. Okay. Once you've got two things. It's funny because one, Yael's afraid of dolls. And two, she didn't know that this was for her until like right now. So she's over there like, what? What? Also, remember that sashing strip that I thought I lost? I had already attached it to this block for this episode, so didn't lose it, thought ahead, right here, sashing strip. Okay, so you attach it to the side here, and then you take your new block and you just, you sew it to that sashing piece. This is, I remake a lot of things at home because I make them and put them someplace safe, and I don't know where that safe place is. Okay, and again, since I'm not pinning, I'm just, I'm going slow. I actually kind of keep my finger in between the two layers as I sew so that I can guide it and make sure that it's lining up correctly until I get closer to the end, and then I hold it where I want it. And then sew. Okay. Look at that sashed block, so cute. Okay, we're going to give this a press because blocks always love to be pressed. They always feel like when they're at their best if you've given them a good little press, you know. And all these little girls, they put on their Sunday clothes for this panel. Like they're like, this is my cute outfit. Except that one, she's wearing pajamas. Look at this, all her friends in their dresses, and she was like, this is my bathrobe. It's very fancy. I wore a headband with flowers. Okay, now you'll have smaller sashing strips that are the width of the block. So the height is, I think it's 12.5 inches, and these ones are like 11 inches. I can measure and know for sure. Yeah, these ones are 11 inches. So when you're sashing, make sure you keep these separate from the 12.5-inch strips because they really do look very close in length. And if you accidentally use these and then cut them down thinking, you know, maybe, I don't know, if you make a mistake, you'll end up having to cut more of these sashing ones. Now, these are going to be for these long sashing rows. And so when you lay out your quilt, this is great to have a design wall, because if you want each of your shoe flies to have a different color, you want to make sure that you're using a different center square at the different pieces of your intersections here. So I've made a blue and a pink and a green and a purple, and now we're just going to go ahead and use a yellow for our sashing. Okay, so with sashing and cornerstones, right sides together, and go ahead and give them a sew in a long straight line. I don't like to chain piece these because I think it gets kind of annoying trying to like pull from the next one to go back, because you are just attaching in a long row things that are all going to be connected. So yeah, now you have this piece here, and now figure out which way you want it. So if you want the girl with the blue dress and the yellow bow to be on top, go ahead and put your sashing on the bottom here. And you're wanting your cornerstone. Let's go to the close-up and I'll show you this. You want your cornerstone seams to match with these seams here. So when you do this, you could pin, and you want it to look like this where they're nesting. I'm not going to pin, but you could. Okay, I'm just going to sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And sew. When I get close, I'm just going to make sure that that seam is nesting correctly. And with cornerstones, sometimes you have to, like, first of all, you should make sure that you sew your projects on one sewing machine, because it gets kind of tricky if you're going between two sewing machines where your seam allowance could be a little bit different. Like if your seam allowance on one machine is a true 1/4 inch and one's a scant 1/4 inch, that will have a real impact on your project. One time I made a quilt, and I got, I think, like 3/4 of the way through on one machine, and then I changed machines because I had been at a retreat, and it did a number on that quilt. Everything was a different size. I couldn't figure out what the heck I did. It worked out okay, because my husband doesn't know anything about seam allowances and doesn't care that some of the points were cut off, but I was really like, oh, I spent all this time on this quilt. Now none of my points match. All right, once you've attached that bottom row of sashing, just take this one here, put this right sides together. Again, you have that option of pinning or not. It's possible we froze.
Yeah, you froze. When you were over at the iron board. Should I type it?
What's happening? Worst case scenario, we unfreeze and it'll be like TV magic where I've like added things. What? Are we still pinwheeling? Okay. Hmm? Am I making a weird face when I froze? Are people commenting, where did you go? I'm having a real pre-cut dust nose itch today. Hmm? Are we working again?
Yeah, it'll catch up. Because
I'm just going to attach the borders while we wait, because that's not the exciting part.
yeah. All right, I got you.
Okay. We had a weird glitch, and I don't really know what's happening, but I think you're here again. So, I am attaching borders. I finished piecing this square in our weird glitch thing, and I'm taking these 5-inch borders, and I'm just adding them to all 4 sides of the quilt. You could do this by going log cabin, where you do like the top and then the bottom and the sides or whatever. You just have to get the borders on all 4 sides. So let's do that. We have hardwood floors in the studio, and the pedal keeps slipping further away, so I'm like leaning back, trying to reach the foot pedal as I sew. Now, one of my favorite things with borders is when I have a little extra fabric to spare, I don't bother cutting the border down to size yet. I just kind of leave it a little longer, and then I square up after. And actually, I know for a fact Darlene Zimmerman does something kind of similar, so it kind of makes me feel like I'm sewing with Darlene when I do something like that. All right, since I know these are long enough, I'm just going to put the border at the bottom, and then I'll attach to each side. Okay. And we're just sewing away. Now, borders are a really great way to make a quilt bigger if you want to give someone a bigger quilt, but you just don't have the time or the energy to really add like a lot more to it. But they're also a great way to square up a quilt. So like if you have some things that are maybe not totally precise, but people probably won't know, you can add a border and then square it up after you add the border. And Darlene loves to talk about how with borders, I'm pressing the border I just added on so I can add on the next one. Darlene loves to talk about how with borders you can also really impact the feel of the quilt. So you could leave a solid rectangular border on, and it could make a quilt feel a little more like masculine or strong or modern, or you can use one of her scallop tools and add a really dainty scallop border, and that makes a quilt feel much more feminine. So this quilt with the sweet little scallop border really feels like it would be right at home in a little girl nursery or like a couch because it's so cute. Okay, all I was doing here was I was taking my rotary cutter and I'm lining up my border with the sides of the quilt so that when I attach the next one, I have a consistent seam to attach it to. And I'm just putting those scraps out of the way. Okay, woo! And taking the next border, starting a little bit under or over the edge of this one because I have that room so I can. You're just going to sew using a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Okay. Now, the great thing about scallop borders, and especially this scallop tool that we're going to be using, is that you can really decide the look that you want for your border. So you can decide if you like how this corner looks, or if you want something a little softer with where like you have a full round edge, or if you just want to skip it and leave a solid border. You can really kind of make up your mind on that. If you do decide that you're going to add a scallop border, a really important thing to note is that when you make your binding, it does need to be bias binding. You cannot bind a border that has interesting shapes in it with a straight of grain fabric because there's not a lot of movement in that fabric. Whereas if you take a fabric and cut it on the bias, it's going to stretch a lot more, which is going to let you bind around those curves and turn the tight edges. And that is going to give you that really cool look at the finished quilt. And I'm just again squaring up this side because now I've got this cute border. Now if you are going to use a scallop border in real life, another super important thing to note is don't do what we're about to do on this episode because we are going to cut the scallops here so that you can see it. But if you want to have a quilt with a finished scallop border and you want to quilt it, you should quilt it and then cut your scallops. That way the fabric doesn't pull or warp, and you get a really beautiful finished scallop. If you cut your scallops first and then quilt, your quilt will go all kinds of different directions. You won't be able to send it out to a long armor, but Darlene had a really great tip for if you want to send a quilt to a long armor to be long arm but still have a scallop border. We're going to show you how to mark where the scallops will be cut, and you could do that and mark them with an erasable pen and then send your quilt out to be quilted, and the quilter can work inside the edges that you've drawn, because she's going to, or she or he will know that that's going to be where that scallop will be cut. And that way you can get really cool custom quilting in each of those scallops, but not have to worry about your quilt going wacky. Okay, so again, I'm about to square up. Do not cut your scallops before you quilt your quilt. Do not cut your scallop before you quilt your quilt. I wasn't listening the first time Darlene said that. I cut my scallops before I quilted my quilt. It was kind of tedious. It's just a thing. Make your life a lot easier. Okay, now this is the part where we have our cute little wall hanging and we want to do some math. We don't want to do math, but we need to do some math. Okay, the scallop tool rulers that Darlene makes for easy quilting come in a variety of sizes, everywhere from 4 inches to 12 inches. And if we go to the up close ruler, or up close camera, I will kind of show you what these look like. So you'll see on this ruler that they have these little holes here and this little bit popping out here, and that is so that you can adjust the size of the scallop anywhere you want at a 1/4 inch increment. And the smaller you get, you don't have as much of a curve here, but then if you go to like a really big scallop, you're going to have a really deep indent in your curve. So before you do any of that, let's go back over here and we're going to talk you through the math. Math is my super strong point. Super strong point. Anyway, you need to see how big this quilt is. So when it gets really large, an easy way to do this is to fold it in half and measure. So this is about 16 inches, and 16 times 2 is 32. I'm going to get my phone out and math it because I don't want to be wrong. How much is it? 16 times 2?
16?
Yeah. Yeah, 32. They're making me question everything. Okay, so we have 32 inches. So take a little piece of paper and make yourself a note. The top is 32 inches. Don't use my measurements, measure your own quilt because it could be a little different. And now you have to decide how many scallops you would like to have. So if I wanted to have, say, 6 scallops on the top, you divide the length of your quilt divided by the number of scallops that you want. And so I say 6 scallops, so my math comes out to 5.3333, and then you're supposed to round to the nearest 1/4 inch. So I think I'm going to do 5.25. And so I'm going to take the smaller of the 2 rulers, and let's go back over here, and I'm going to mark it to 5.25. Now, the most important piece of advice when using this ruler, that's straight from Darlene, is that you might have to fudge it a little bit. So she recommends starting at the ends and working your way to the middle so that you have some room to fudge it if you need to. So lay your scallop ruler right up to the top, and using an erasable pen, go ahead and mark that scallop line, and then just scoot it over so that the point kind of matches. And the way that you fudge it is you can leave a little bit more room, you can make a scallop a little bit bigger. There's a lot of ways to kind of work it. So I'm going to do 3, and then I'm going to go to the other side and also, again from this side, mark my scallop, and then go in, and again mark my scallop, and it doesn't matter if it's not entirely right. Okay, so you get here, and this was the end of this scallop, and this was the end over here, and you can see that if we just go exactly, you're going to have this weird little like 1/2 inch. So all you have to do here is maybe just make this scallop just a little bit bigger. So if you make it like a little bit more, and then go in and down, and then just connect this, no one will ever know. So you fudged it a little bit in the middle there, but it looks super good, right? And you're going to repeat this on the bottom. using your same kind of math. Okay, now let's go back to the main camera and we'll talk again. Now, the side is a whole nother story. Well, it's not a whole nother story. It's the exact same thing, but you have to do the math again. So, fold your piece in half, measure, and this is 17 times 2. I have my calculator, and it's 34. So 34, and say I want 7 scallops. No, let's say I want 6 scallops. Okay, it's 5.6 this time. So say I want 6 scallops, so like the same number. Now my math is 5.6, and the closest quarter inch is 5.5. So now you're going to go to your scallop ruler, and you're going to connect it at 5.5. Now you could always decide that you don't like how little that scallop is, and you want something a lot more aggressive, and you don't want to do the math, and you just kind of want to wing it, because that's a thing people do a lot. And you could say, you know what, no, I want a very large scallop. So I want like a 9-inch scallop here. And you could draw this 9-inch scallop instead of the little one, and all you would do is you do the exact same thing. You'd have, you know, fewer of them, but you'd have a big scallop on the side. So we're not going to do that though, but you could. Now I'm going right to the side here, and I am going to just draw my little guy. And I prefer my scallop corners to have like soft curves, so rounded curves. So you can kind of see here, this was a scallop, and then this was a scallop from the top row, and this is a scallop from the side row here. And so if you want to round out that corner, all you do is you take your scallop ruler and kind of fudge the difference like this. And now I'm going to have this beautiful curve like that. Isn't that pretty? Okay. And you're going to continue doing this all the way down the side of your quilt. Although, remember that you have to leave room to fudge it just a little bit. So don't go all the way to the corner. I'm going to the other side now. Whoa, scallop ruler came loose. It's on a rampage. Scallops everywhere. Okay. And now this one, you can see the fudging is going to need to be maybe a little bit more aggressive, because this isn't a 1/2 inch, this is like 1.5 inches. So I'm going to just up this to like 6 inches here, and I'm going to change this one to 6 inches, and that gets me a little bit closer, and then I'm just going to connect that. So yeah, isn't that pretty? It's very free form, do what you want, and you won't really notice when you're doing it. So let's go ahead and go back to the main camera. Now remember, if you are doing this in person for a real quilt that you're going to use and cuddle with, do your quilting first. But after you've done your quilting, you can just take your rotary cutter and very carefully cut along your marked lines. And actually, it would be a lot smarter to not use your rotary cutter when you get to those points, because you don't want to accidentally cut through any of your like cute designs here. So you could take a really sharp pair of scissors and you could manually cut it. And remember that you're still going to bind this also. Okay. And I'm not going to do this all the way around because you get the idea, but you'll end up with your scallops like this, and it looks super cute. Now, you can also reposition like where you start your scallops. So if you don't like the rounded corner, all you have to do is start with a half scallop in the corner instead of a full scallop, and you'll get more of this cute point. Or if you want a full square, Julia was telling me, let's go back over here and we'll talk about this. Julia was saying that if I wanted to get that cute square in the corner like what Darlene did, that all I would have to do was do like a half scallop. And so instead of starting in this full corner, I would kind of leave it about halfway and start my scallops here, so that I would have a scallop here and then another scallop, whoa, starting here. These are hard to see. This pen is tired of working for me. I will get another pen. This is also erasable, don't worry. Okay. Whoa. Okay, so I would have done a half scallop here, left the corner alone, So I would maybe take a straight edge so I could see this, and then do like about a half scallop. And remember, because you're fudging it, it's okay. But then, yeah. Oh, you know what? Actually, I want my scallop to be a little bit closer. You kind of just eyeball it. So in this way, you would get that cute point at the corner. So let's go back to the main aisle, camera aisle. And I'll cut out this corner that other way so you can kind of see what's happening there. Okay. Whoa. And it's really easy to use these scallops to adjust however you want. But if you don't have the scallop ruler and you still want to do scallops, you can kind of achieve the same thing, maybe with like a plate or an edge or something. You just won't be able to have the flexibility to do as much or the variety of sizes without the scallop ruler. So it really does make it easy to adjust it. But you can see how here, just by changing where we positioned the scallops, we get more of this look versus rounding our edges. I guess I should finish cutting out some scallops so you can see that. Woo! Scallop party. Okay. Versus here where you started with your scallop on the corner and you got a really sweet rounded edge. So it really gives you a lot of say in what you want to do in your quilts. You can also make like a cool wave effect. You can do all kinds of things with the scallop ruler, but it really adds a way to kind of mix up your borders and really impress people with your finishing tricks. So we hope that you've enjoyed learning about the scallop ruler and this cute block. And if you make one of these, please share it with hashtag It's So Friday Finish. We'd love to see it. And otherwise, we'll see you back here for our next episode in November. All right, have a great weekend, everyone.